In the middle of the night, on the dusty edge of a forgotten war, a battle is raging. But these soldiers, they don't answer to a president or a prime minister. They don't wear a nation's flag. They answer to a board of directors. These are the corporate warriors, the private armies fighting the secret wars of the 21st century. They operate in the gray zones beyond the traditional laws of war, hired by world powers to do the jobs they can't or won't do themselves. But what happens when you give for-profit soldiers the power of life and death? What happens when the motives of war get tangled up with the demands of a stock price? The consequences are more shocking, and the political fallout more chaotic than you can imagine. This is the story of the return of mercenaries and how they are quietly reshaping our world. One bullet, one contract, one secret deal at a time? Section 1. The Ghost Soldiers. The idea of a soldier of fortune is as old as war itself. But the modern mercenary isn't some swashbuckling rogue from a movie. He's a contractor, an employee. He works for a private military company, or PMC, and it's a global industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. We're not talking about a handful of companies here. We're talking about a worldwide shadow army that lets governments project power without leaving any fingerprints. So, what's the big appeal? It boils down to a concept experts call plausible deniability. Let's say a country wants to intervene in a foreign conflict, but its public is sick of war. Sending in the national army means flag-draped coffins on the news and huge political blowback. But what if you could send in a private army instead? Their casualties almost never show up in official stats. Their actions can be officially denied. It's a government's way of being at war without ever having to admit it. For years, Russia completely denied any connection to the infamous Wagner group, even as its fighters swarmed across Syria and Africa. And for just as long, the United States relied heavily on PMCs in Iraq and Afghanistan for tasks that used to be reserved for soldiers, creating a second parallel army that operated with way less public oversight. It got so extreme that by 2011, the U.S. had more contractor personnel in Afghanistan and Iraq than it had uniformed soldiers. And these aren't just cooks or mechanics. PMCs offer the full menu of military services, from logistics and intelligence to full-blown combat missions. They give governments incredible flexibility, letting them skip the political red tape of deploying a traditional army. But that flexibility comes at a terrifying price. When you outsource war, you create a legal and ethical black hole. To really understand that cost, we have to go back to the place where the modern PMC cemented its reputation in blood and fire: Iraq. Section 2. A history written in blood, the Blackwater precedent. In the early 2000s, the war in Iraq sparked a gold rush for the private security industry. The occupation was a mess, and official forces were stretched dangerously thin. Into that chaos stepped a company that would become the global face of privatized war, Blackwater. Founded by a former Navy SEAL named Eric Prince, Blackwater landed massive U.S. government contracts to protect diplomats in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Their operators were the real deal, often recruited from the most elite special forces units in the world. And they were good at their job. As Prince himself liked to point out, not a single person under their protection was ever killed. But on the streets of Iraq, they operated with an attitude of total impunity that created fear and anger among the locals. They were a private army that didn't answer to the military chain of command and seemed to be above Iraqi law. All that tension finally exploded on September 16, 2007, in Nisour Square, Baghdad. A Blackwater convoy was clearing traffic for a U.S. diplomat. What happened next is still debated. The Blackwater guards swore they were ambushed, but Iraqi witnesses and government investigators told a different story. They said the guards opened fire, completely unprovoked, on unarmed civilians. The result was a massacre. When the shooting stopped, 14 Iraqi civilians were dead, including a 9-year-old boy. The incident created a global firestorm. It exposed the darkest side of privatized war for the whole world to see. Who holds these private soldiers accountable? The initial shocking answer was nobody. The contractors were protected by an immunity order from the U.S. Occupation Authority, which shielded them from being prosecuted in Iraq. Back in the U.S., the legal fight dragged on for years, highlighting a massive gap in the law. These men weren't soldiers, so they couldn't be court-martialed, but they committed their alleged crimes overseas, creating a jurisdictional nightmare. Eventually, 4 Blackwater guards were convicted in an American federal court. But in a final controversial twist, they were all pardoned by the U.S. president in 2020. The Nisour Square massacre was a turning point. Blackwater was forced to rebrand, first as Z Services, then as Academy. But the precedent had been set. It proved that a private company could deploy a small army, get caught up in atrocities, and still, for the most part, escape any real long-term consequences. It was a business model, and other world powers were definitely taking notes. Section 3, the new Playbook, Wagner and the state-sponsored mercenary. While Blackwater was the poster child for the Western corporate PMC, a newer, more dangerous model was taking shape in Russia, the Wagner Group. For years, the Kremlin insisted Wagner was just a private company. That was a useful fiction. In reality, Wagner was a direct, if unofficial, tool of Russian foreign policy. It was bankrolled through state contracts awarded to its founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, a man so deep inside the Kremlin he was nicknamed Putin's chef. Wagner wasn't just a company, it was a hybrid beast. Part military force, part political interference unit, and part resource extraction enterprise. Their playbook became crystal clear in Syria starting in 2015. While the official Russian military gave air support to the Assad regime, Wagner mercenaries were the boots on the ground, the shock troops who secured oil fields and fought in battles where the Kremlin didn't want to risk its own soldiers. From there, Wagner's influence spread like wildfire across Africa. They weren't just soldiers, they were kingmakers. In places like the Central African Republic and Mali, Wagner offered a simple, brutal deal to unstable governments. We'll provide you with elite security, and you give us untaxed access to your country's gold, diamonds, and other natural resources. They propped up dictators, allegedly meddled in elections, and left a trail of human rights abuses, all while making money and expanding Russia's influence. This was a whole new game. Mercenaries weren't just supporting a state's army anymore. They were carrying out its foreign policy and paying for themselves while doing it. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Wagner was right there, first as a deniable force, and later taking a central, savage role in battles like the fight for Bakhmut. Of course, the Wagner story took a bizarre turn with Prigozhin's failed mutiny in June 2023, followed by his death in a mysterious plane crash just 2 months later. That seemed to be the end of the group as we knew it. Russia's Ministry of Defense is now trying to absorb Wagner's operations and personnel into new structures like the Africa Corps. But the model that Wagner perfected, the state-sponsored proxy force, isn't going anywhere. It's just too effective. It's now the template for how a major power can wage undeclared wars, grab economic assets, and challenge its rivals across the globe with almost no political fallout at home. CTA, midroll. The rise of these corporate armies and state-sponsored mercenaries is one of the biggest shifts in warfare in a generation. It's blurring the lines between public and private power, and even challenging what it means to be a state. We're about to get into how this changes the battlefield of tomorrow, but first, if you find this kind of analysis valuable, do us a favor and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep digging into the hidden forces that shape our world. Section 4, the battlefield of tomorrow. The return of the mercenary isn't just changing who fights our wars, it's changing how they're fought. The biggest change is in how we perceive the cost of war. When a nation's own soldiers die, it's a national tragedy. It's a political crisis. But when contractors die, their deaths are often unrecorded and go completely unnoticed by the public. This allows governments to keep high-risk military operations going for years with far less backlash, effectively hiding the true human cost of conflict. On the actual battlefield, PMCs are powerful force multipliers. They bring in specialized skills that a regular army might lack. Think cyber warfare gurus, expert drone pilots, or seasoned intelligence analysts. PMCs are now investing in and deploying advanced tech like AI surveillance and unmanned systems, making the line between a private company's power and a state's military even fuzzier. They aren't just plugging holes anymore. They're offering cutting-edge services that can decide who wins a war. This makes PMCs the perfect tool for hybrid warfare. That modern mess of conventional fighting, covert tactics, cyber attacks, and propaganda. A country can now use its official army for one thing, have a PMC handle a messier task somewhere else, and get a team of cyber contractors to shut down the enemy's infrastructure, all at the same time. It creates a tangled, multi-layered conflict that international law and diplomacy are completely unprepared to deal with. And maybe most worrying, the boom in PMCs spreads advanced military skills all over the globe. An elite special forces soldier who once served a single country can now sell their deadly expertise to the highest bidder, whether that's a friendly nation, a corporation, or someone far more sinister. It's a trend that risks empowering dangerous groups and making it that much harder to ever achieve peace. The mercenary of tomorrow might not be on the ground at all. They could be piloting a drone from another continent or launching a cyber attack that cripples a country, all for a private client. Section 5, the price of privatized war. So, what's the real price we pay for all of this? The single biggest cost is the death of accountability. For centuries, the modern world has operated on one core idea. The state, and only the state, has the right to use violence. Privatizing war completely shatters that principle. It turns violence into a commodity, a service to be bought and sold on the open market. This creates a massive conflict of interest. A soldier's duty is to their country. A contractor's primary duty is to their company's bottom line. So what happens when keeping a war going is more profitable than ending it? What happens when a company's profits clash with human rights? It leads to a huge accountability gap. PMCs exist in a legal twilight zone. International laws like the Geneva Conventions were written for nations and their armies, not corporations. While a contractor who commits a war crime can technically be prosecuted, chasing them across borders is a legal and political maze. Things like the Montreux document exist to set guidelines for hiring PMCs, but they're voluntary and have no teeth. For the victims of PMC violence, justice is often just an illusion. Ultimately, the rise of PMCs makes war less democratic. A decision to send people to fight can be made in a corporate boardroom, miles away from any public debate or government oversight. It lets leaders launch wars of choice without ever having to get the support of their own people. This is a quiet takeover of the democratic process. It creates a world where wars are fought in the shadows, by soldiers who answer not to citizens, but to CEOs. The very nature of our global security is becoming more fractured, more unpredictable, and a whole lot more dangerous. From the bloody streets of Baghdad to the mineral-rich fields of Africa, private armies are back as major players on the world stage. They offer governments a deal that's hard to refuse, the power to wage war with less political risk. But it's a deal that comes with a heavy, hidden price. It's creating a world where accountability is a fantasy, where profit can be a motive for war, and where the basic rules of conflict are being rewritten before our very eyes. The line between a soldier and a contractor, between a national army and a corporate workforce, is dissolving. The 21st century battlefield is becoming a marketplace, and the tools of violence are up for sale. We're left with a chilling, critical question. When a soldier's shoulder patch is a company logo, who are they really fighting for? What are your thoughts on this? Is the rise of private military companies a necessary evil in modern warfare? Or is it a dangerous path we're heading down? Let us know what you think in the comments. And for more deep dives that break down the forces shaping our world, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching.